just know what's going on. You kind of just know what their steps are going to be. And I mean, it's kind of like intuition.
So this has nothing to do with anything. It's just a reason for me to make you listen to a song, which I can't make you, but I hope you will. And parents will probably know this song. It's pretty famous, and maybe some of you. But I have a favorite song, and it comes on, and I was listening to it, and there's a couple of lines that just get me every time in the song, and it is called "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald." Okay, blank stares are telling me probably don't know the song, which is awesome because you're in for a treat. I'm serious. I would love for you to write down the title of this and look it up on YouTube and listen to it. It's by a man named Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot, spelled exactly the way you think. Again, I can't make you do this, but this is just a point. Lightfoot. He actually died just a few months ago. I grew up listening. It's called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a ship traveling across Lake Superior in 1975. And there are times when Superior is apparently very stormy, and the storms came early that year, and it wrecked that ship, and all 29 men went to the bottom of Lake Superior. And I grew up listening to this song. I was 9 years old when that happened. I was not really watching the news at 9 years old and didn't know. But this song came out, and I listened to this song. So I've been listening to this song for, 45 years. And I always thought it happened long, long ago. And I was playing it with my kids, and my kids said, "Well, when did this ship sink?" I don't know, a long time ago, like in the 1800s. I looked it up, 1975. And so you can visit. I hope to go in the northern peninsula of Michigan. There's an Edmund Fitzgerald Memorial. Anyway, okay, this is long thing is to say that this is one of the most beautiful poetic songs. But I challenge you to look up the Edmund Fitzgerald on Wikipedia and read the brief summary of, this is what happened. And then listen to the song. What? The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The wreck of the Edmund, that's the name of the ship. Fitzgerald? Fitz. The Edmund Fitz, F-I-T-Z, Fitzgerald. If you put in Gordon Lightfoot wreck, it will come up immediately. Anyway, my point is there are a couple of lines that I'm going to share with you. And I feel like, because I've been listening to this song my whole life, and it almost gives me a sense of reverence or awe when it comes on. I have 600 songs loaded on a thing, that play in my car. And whenever it comes up, I'm like, oh. And I just have to take a moment because I feel like I know those men, and I feel like I know this story in a way that I don't think a book about the shipwreck would have done. And there's a line, one of many beautiful lines, but he says, "Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours?" And I honestly take a gasp every time I hear this line. I'm picturing, what if I'm on a boat and the waves, he says, and the waves crash over the railing. I'm picturing it, I'm seeing it, and we're all going to die. Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? It's like every moment that goes by, it's just, I'm going to die. I just get it over with. And the ship is filling, and it's going lower and lower and lower. Where are you, Lord? I'm afraid. And that one line, do you know what I mean? Almost makes me cry. And I know these guys. And so Gordon Lightfoot died a few months ago. And so there's a line at the end. He said they met in the cathedral there, and the church bell rang. It rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald. I heard that when Gordon Lightfoot died, they went back and they rang it 30 times. One for him. And so the whole point of this long digression is that I know something about that because of the song that I don't think I would ever know. Or, I have I don't know the names of the guys. I don't even know, what sort of metal things they were hauling across Lake Superior. I don't know the date, but I know it in a way that the facts I would not know. And every time I hear the song, I experience it again. So it's a lovely song. You can choose to listen to it or not. But anyway, thank you for your thoughts on poetry and prose. It was very interesting to me. You brought up really, really good points, all of you. And it's just something for us to keep in mind, not to close ourselves off to either one, I guess, you know. We probably have natural tastes and we gravitate, just like some people really like fiction or some people really like to read nonfiction. It's a natural taste, but open yourself to things that aren't your taste sometimes because we can know things in different ways. Maybe to be fully formed human beings, we need all the ways. I don't know. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk on poetry. My gosh. Okay, let's talk about Charlemagne. I brought a picture. This is on the cover of my book. I don't know if it's on the cover. Apparently not. This is a statue of Charlemagne. That's all I have to say about that. I don't have no embellishment. It is a statue of Charlemagne. We don't have a lot of representations of him. I do not know. The back of my book probably tells me more. The cover shows a 9th century bronze equestrian statue in the Louvre. So made not long after the death of Charlemagne. That's always good to know. You know, if something's made in a time period where there are still people living that remember this person alive, that tells you something. So I'm assuming that it is a reasonable representation of what Charlemagne actually looked like. Einhard gives us a very brief physical description, but I have a comment to make about that physical description, and I don't know that it's going to be helpful for us. But this is the gentleman, and as I told you last week, his dad was the first of his line to become king of the Franks. His dad Pepin. His grandpa was the guy who fought the Muslims off in 732. And Einhard starts with a little background. Talks about Pepin. Talks a little about Charles Martel. Talks about Pepin. But in his introduction, he gives, I found 3. I don't know if you guys found 3 reasons for writing this. I found 3 distinct reasons, but they weren't labeled first, second, third. You want to give me one of them, Alex?
Because others would try to write the same histories as him, but none would be as accurate as his retelling.
Okay. And why is he going to be so accurate?
Because he was
probably
a member of Charlemagne's court, and he alluded to a personal debt to his family. So he knew them.
Exactly. Charlemagne, I was a nobody, and Charlemagne took me under his wing. Gave me a good education, you know, took care of me. I owe it to him for the truth to be out. What just overall, I don't think I asked you this, but overall, what is your impression? Bless you. Do you need Kleenex? Okay. What do you think? How does Einhard feel about Charlemagne?
Pretty positively. I'm saying, like, I want to write about this man's morals. This guy's a good guy.
He's a fan.
Yeah.
He might not be president of the club, but he's got a T-shirt. You know what I mean? He's in the club. He's definitely a fan. He's very positive. I want to point a couple of things out that he says that kind of back that up. That this guy likes Charlemagne. And how could you not if he helped in your upbringing and your education? So that's one reason. I know the truth because I was there, and other people may botch it. So I want to lay down the facts. Did anybody find another reason? Yes. Go ahead, Alex.
He also wanted to honor his king and also honor his personal debt to Charlemagne.
Okay. Which kind of is similar. Well, those are 2 separate things. Because he says, I am very conscious of the fact that no one can describe these events more accurately than I, which is what we just said. And then he says, Charlemagne took in my the care Charlemagne took in my upbringing. But elaborate on what you just said. Yeah.
honoring, well, obviously honoring his king is my words.
Okay.
And also his personal debt to Charlemagne. Honoring Charlemagne as a person.
Okay. Because
And then, also because I have a personal debt to Charlemagne, that's another reason.
okay. Yes. So here's you said to what did you say to honor him? I don't remember. I wrote Charlemagne is worthy. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
He says this. I cannot be absolutely sure that these happenings will in fact ever be described by anyone else. I have therefore decided that it would be better to record these events for myself for the information of posterity, even though there is a chance that they may be repeated in other histories, rather than allow the extraordinary life of this most remarkable king, the greatest man of all those living in his own period, to sink into the shades of oblivion, together with his outstanding achievements. Yes. And that's nice. Sink into the shades of oblivion. You know, some of us talked about the places where poetry and prose meet and the figures of speech. That's lovely. Sink into the shades of oblivion. He says at the end of his introduction, and I love this, it's kind of warns me though. He says, there's nothing to marvel at in my writing this, beyond Charlemagne's own deeds, except perhaps that I, not a Roman by birth, and a man but little versed in the tongue of the Romans, should have imagined that I could compose anything acceptable and suitable in the Latin language, and that I should have pushed my impudence so far as to scorn the advice of Cicero, given in Book 1 of the Tusculanae Disputationes. Speaking about Latin authors, he says there, as you can read for yourself, here comes Cicero, for a man to commit his thoughts to writing, when he can neither arrange them nor bring any new light to bear upon them, and indeed, when he has no attraction whatsoever to offer to his reader, is a senseless waste of time and paper too. It does sound like Cicero. So Einhard says, you know what, I'm going to roll the dice and risk it. Cicero might not approve. Maybe I am not shedding more light on anything. But as a matter of fact, all we really have is Einhard and Notker. If a lot of people wrote a biography of this man, we don't have it anymore. So it's a good thing he did. Okay. Part 1. Here, I'm going to think, because I want to talk about the next thing you're reading. Some other stuff okay, we will do this. I'm going to skip over the backstory in Book 1. This was his grandpa, this was his dad. It's self-explanatory, I feel. Book 2 is all about his wars. Einhard is a great author, and here's why. He tells us exactly what he's going to tell us. Remember the tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then tell them what you told them? He says, first of all, I shall describe his achievements at home and abroad, then his personal habits and enthusiasms, then the way in which he administered his kingdom, and last of all, his death, omitting from all this nothing which ought to be known or indeed which is worthy of being recorded. Part 1, achievements at home and abroad. It appears that his achievements are primarily fighting people. Did you get that impression? There's just a lot of wars. I do not expect you to remember all of these wars. Do not worry about it. Hopefully my little map came in handy. Perhaps I grabbed a student's book yesterday, and I noticed there were maps in the front of yours. I have no maps in my old edition. So between that, if you wanted to know where in the world is he now, at least you could look it up on the map. But hopefully my map at least gave you a sense of to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. The guy is fighting on every front. And I asked you kind of a nebulous question. Why do you think Charlemagne fought so many wars? I mean, this is wide open. Yes.
I think personally to unify the church. Like there was a lot of paganism and a lot of people falling away from the faith. They just fall around and Charlemagne's like, actually surrender. You're Christian now.
He did seem very interested in spreading the faith. And we may have our opinions on the quality of the faith thus spread, but it doesn't mean his heart wasn't in the right place, if you know what I mean. Yeah, Matthew.
Kind of to like almost like reunify the Roman Empire almost, because he like it was known as the Holy Roman Empire, and also along with that to like with what you said the religion kind of the Muslims didn't really get any place in Europe, but they were in Spain for a long time.
Yeah, this is a battle between two faith systems, and it was a critical battle, and it's just very weird to me because when I was growing up, and for the last several hundred years, the big enemy. Well, when I was growing up, it was the Soviet Union. Okay, this is the big bugaboo that's going to get you. And I remember being out on a fishing boat with my grandpa, and I was very little, so cut me some slack. I was like 5, and I was said, "Oh, the Germans have submarines or something like that." And my grandpa looked at me and said, "I think that would be the Soviet Union now." Like I missed the boat, but it was the Germans, it was the Soviets. Once upon a time, the Muslims were the big threat, and it's interesting to me that it's again. You see that battle is being renewed, and something we need to remember about current events. This is a 1,400-year-long battle. This isn't new. And I'm not referencing Israel. That's an even older battle between Arab groups and the Jews. But it's funny because they were kind of off people's radar. Muslim countries were off people's radar, and it was all these other big superpowers that were the threat. But it was a threat then. Okay, I'm going to go to Rhett next, though, because I saw his hand first. Yes, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay, go ahead, Jesse.
Have you ever heard about King Baldwin before?
I don't know.
He did kind of the same thing where he like defended against the I can't remember his name was like he was a sultan and his name was like it started with an S. But yeah, he had leprosy.
That is a fascinating conglomeration of information. Say that again.
He defended Jerusalem.
Oh, Baldwin. Yes, in Jerusalem. Yes, I do know him. Baldwin was just I didn't really have any hat to hang it on.
I think he was like 16 when he fought off this like Turkish army, and like he killed like 90%.
You know what? In a couple weeks, we're going to talk about Crusaders and the Crusader states. So hang on to that. Okay, no, it was Karsten.
I feel like one reason that he might have been right was power corrupts. No matter how good of a person you are, in most situations, if there's a king, you see him fighting wars either to defend his country or to expand his country.
And Einhard's not going to say that because Einhard's a fan, right? He's not going to say, Charlemagne just wanted to take over this group of people. So he whooped up on them and took their lands. He's not going to say that.
It's not like ruthless, like I just want to take over, but somewhere in his motive was probably, oh yeah, I can get a bigger kingdom, might as well.
It is very possible. Okay, Kyle and then Alex.
So just knowing that like, these wars happen over and over again, the cycle of you killed after people, then they come back, they grow their country again, have a good population, kill all your population again.
Yes. The Saxons apparently were particularly troublesome. We'll get to some specifics here in a minute, but they just kept doing this. Like, we make a peace and you turn around and do it again and again and
Kill
again.
yourselves.
Yes, because you keep losing. Yeah, Alex.
I also thought that he was kind of taken up in his father's warring legacy. I mean, it was his dad that like expanded the Frankish Empire like so much.
The Franken Empire. We need to be careful with that. Yes.
I wanted to add, like, history is from the eyes of the conqueror, not the conquered. So we don't fully know if he was, and we don't, unfortunately, we don't have as much information about the war as we do. So we don't know if it was a good conquering where it's just like, you just want to take over so that you guys can be Christian, or just pillage through taking over people.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we don't really know that completely because history is from the eyes of those who conquered.
Yeah, it looks like from what we saw, he just came and then surrendered, and then he moved on.
I mean,
Yeah.
kind of. I mean,
But then he kept coming back to the Saxons. I mean, he said it went over 30 years. You know, this went on for over 30 years. Well, here's what I did. We can speculate, right? We can just sort of guess, and we'll never know what was in his heart or his mind. But we do know what Einhard said. And so I made a list of places where he talks about reasons. Okay, so I'm just going to read off, like I'm not going to read any long passages. I'm just going to kind of bullet point you and so see if you see like a repetition of anything or a stream. Okay. Okay, but I've got, okay. Once matters were settled in Aquitaine and this particular war was finished, now that his partner on the throne had been withdrawn from the anxieties of this world, you know, his brother died, Charlemagne next fought a war against the Longobards. He undertook this at the request of Hadrian, Bishop of the city of Rome. Reason number one, Pope asked him. Number two, in the war when Italy was over, the one against the Saxons was taken up once more. They are much given to devil worship, and they are hostile to our religion. They think it no dishonor to violate and transgress the laws of God and man. Murder, robbery, and arson were of constant occurrence. This goes back to the spreading the gospel, or just dealing with a group of people that sounds like they kept attacking the Frankish kingdom. They were causing trouble. 63. The Saxons again. The last were to give up their devil worship and their malpractices inherited from their fathers. And then once they had adopted the sacraments to the Christian faith and religion, they were to be united with the Franks and become one people with them. Absorption of other peoples as I don't know, fully fledged Franks, I guess, with all the rights of Frankhood, and to build up his kingdom. This could be another reason. The Britons, they refused to obey his command. So he sent an expedition against them. I don't know what he commanded them. It says, Einhard doesn't say. But I don't like the sound of it. Because the question lurking in my mind is who gave Charlemagne the right to give the Britons, you know,
Not the Britons.
it's the Bretons. So this is not this is a group of people that are in Frankish. They're not in Frankish territory per se. It's the Bretons, but refused to obey his command. And then later it says he attacked them, and then it says they promised he promised he and his people would obey Charlemagne's orders. Next up, war in Bavaria. It was occasioned by the pride and folly of Duke Tassilo. He was encouraged by his wife, who had a bone to pick with Charlemagne. And then he mentions again Tassilo's arrogance. What passed for pride and arrogance in Charlemagne's mind? I don't know. It says again, not only did he refuse to carry out Charlemagne's orders, but he did his utmost to provoke the king to war. Could it be that there were people that Charlemagne thought he was in charge of, but those people didn't really fully get the memo that Charlemagne is in charge? If you follow what I mean? Like, you're my subjects. Yeah, no, we're not. We don't really have to do what you say. Yes, you do. I will fight you. I'll bring an army and kill you if you don't. I just, as I was going through and underlining these things, I was thinking, oh man, pride and arrogance on the other side, or refusal to obey my orders. It doesn't sound very good. Okay, Huns. All the Hun nobility died in this war. All their glory departed. All their wealth and their treasures assembled over so many years were dispersed. The memory of man cannot recall any war of the Franks by which they were so enriched and their material possessions so increased. These Franks, who until then had seemed almost paupers, now discovered so much gold and silver in the palace and captured so much precious booty in their battles that it could rightly be maintained they had in all justice taken from the Huns what these last had unjustly stolen from other nations. Well, it wasn't the Huns. They just ripped it off from other people. But lots of material wealth. I'm not saying anything necessarily negative about Shaw. I'm just saying what Einhard, who's a fan, is telling us. Okay, next one. Well, the Danes. He doesn't say anything. We forgive him for fighting the Danes. He can fight Vikings with impunity, in my opinion. Vikings are bad news. These are the wars through a period of 47 years during the whole of his reign. The Frankish kingdom, which he inherited from his father Pepin, was already far-flung and powerful. By these wars, he increased it to such an extent that he added to it almost as much again, almost doubled his possessions. Is this a motive? I don't know. And okay, so I think one of you already said it. Don't know if you said it in this way. Self-aggrandizement, but that's not what you said. But that was, somebody said something to make himself seem important, powerful, big. I don't even remember who said it. But I feel like this has been said already here. Okay, listen to what Einhard says. First of all, before I read it, you got to remember something. There's a Roman Empire in the East, right? It's still going on. It never stopped. Constantinople is awesome. It's so opulent, beautiful, wealthy, well-governed, that people that would go and visit it were just stunned, people from the West. Because at this point, a grand palace in the West, we probably wouldn't think it was so grand if we visited it today, you know? Many of you probably live in houses, all of us maybe live in houses nicer and cleaner, definitely, a little better facilities than anybody, you know, was living in. It might be big and impressive, but in Constantinople, it was gorgeous and bright, and you know, and all the spices still flowing in from the east, and everything. So people would go and they would just be amazed. But in the West, many people didn't ever go, and they didn't know. They heard stories, but they didn't really know. So there got to be, oh yeah, you know, we have Charlemagne. He's the emperor of the West, and we have the emperor in Constantinople. He's the emperor of the East, and thinking that they're somehow on the same level, that their power and authority and possessions and strength and wealth is on the same level. So it's sort of funny then when you read these things, because this is what Einhard says. He'd been fighting in the territories that were sort of in between the two, you know, in the, you know, the west of the east and the east of the west, in between. Charlemagne allowed the emperor of Constantinople to keep, in view of his friendship with him and the treaty which he had made, the lands that were in between. Allowed him to keep.
Lost.
Well, the point is that the emperor in Constantinople is like Charlemagne is a bug you could just flick off your table. That's what they're thinking. Like, who is this guy? Who is this guy over there? He's calling himself the emperor. I don't know. There's a line from one of the Lord of the Rings movies, you know, where Wormtongue is talking about the men of Rohan, you know, and you lay on the floor, in the reeking floor with your dogs, and I don't know. This is what the emperor in Constantinople thinks of Charlemagne. Bunch of losers. Charlemagne actually betrothed his daughter, his kid, to the royal kid in Constantinople. Can't remember which was the girl and which was the boy. Doesn't matter. And then at this point, the empress, it was an Empress Irene, a lady was in charge in Constantinople. Her son was underage. Unfortunately, when he grew up, she didn't give it. She just liked being empress. But anyway, she did this betrothal, and then her position got better, and she just ditched Charlemagne. It was just a sort of humoring him. Tell that guy over there that his kid can marry my kid, maybe, but that's never going to happen because why would I be connected with some scum like you? That was honestly, that was the outlook. But Charlemagne's like, I am the equal, and my child is going to marry their child. And so the fact that he allowed anyone in Constantinople to do anything is wishful thinking on Einhard's part. But yes, Alex, go ahead.
Einhard ended up saying that he was very protective of his daughters and like he didn't want to betroth them to anyone for a long time.
Yeah.
So it might have been a boy who was like willing to send it over to Constantinople.
Yeah, go ahead, Ethan. I'm looking for something about that, but I'll listen
I'm
too.
gonna be honest with you. Charlemagne sounds kind of cocky. Like, oh, and my children can be betrothed to east over there. Like,
Well, he wanted to present himself in the manner. This is the power and authority I have, and in that world, it wasn't showy necessarily. I mean, I can't speak for his heart or his mind, but it wasn't showy to be dressed in the king's robe as if you're the king, or wear the crown if you're the king. It was just it was legitimate. It was yes. It was of his place in feudal society. Okay, I'm gonna do Kyle first, and then you're right.
So this is also Einhard's perspective as not a part, like he's not like the king or like a sidekick. He's just part of the thing. I'm looking up to this high magical person, and he's above it all. He's sending his kid over here. He's the best, and he's praising Einhard. And we're looking upon this like, well, he looks arrogant. Well, that could be different times, and also this could be arrogant from Einhard's like, yes, he's the best too. Yes. I'm protecting him. He's the best.
Sure.
And so he's arrogant to others' perspective on Charlemagne. Charlemagne could have been this honest guy and said, I lost them, so they have to win. Like, he could say this in a way, but like Einhard's taking this and twisting this to make Charlemagne look better.
Yeah. Ethan doesn't look convinced, but this is the legitimate observation. Charlemagne's not saying any of these things. A guy who adores Charlemagne is saying these things. And at that time, to make him look a little, like to us, arrogant, wouldn't have been arrogance. It would have been a legitimate show of his authority. That's a really good point. Yeah, Rhett.
Seems like he makes like a person like been Christian but still like some of the just like with the arrogant kind of like and like how we just talked about that necessarily wasn't a bad thing then. But like he mixed like a fighting warrior camp with a Christian.
Yes. Yeah. The Franks had a history of being a warrior, all those Germanic tribes, a warrior culture. It's hard to let it go. But we also, when we read history, like Kyle said, who wrote it? But who are we who are reading it? And how does it come across to us? And what is our value system? And so history is fraught with levels of difficulty, because what I really want is a time machine. I don't know that I want to go back into the middle of one of these wars, but I'd like to know, there are things I'd like to know. What was it really like? What was really going on there? And unfortunately, I'm never going to know. I do want to mention something about his daughters, because this is in the second part, the part about his personal life or whatever. Yeah, it says he kept his daughters with him in his household until the very day of his death, instead of giving them in marriage to his own men or to foreigners, maintaining that he could not live without them. Which, it was a little weird. It's like, but I love my daughters so much. But okay, I'm going to read the next sentence and then I'm going to tell you what it means. The consequence was that he had a number of unfortunate experiences. He who had been so lucky in all else that he undertook. His daughters kept getting pregnant. I'm sorry. But when I read that, it's like, as a result, he had a series of unfortunate experiences. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. However, he shut his eyes to all that happened, as if no suspicion of any immoral conduct had ever reached him, or as if the rumor was without foundation. This is a mystery of Charlemagne. Dude, marry, let him get married for crying out loud. No. Series of unfortunate experiences. Okay, back to him being wanting to look important in the eyes of other world rulers. All right, so I am now the emperor of the West. I should behave accordingly, and I expect the emperor in Constantinople to treat me like his equal, even though they're just kind of laughing behind his back over in Constantinople. Another world ruler that he had a brush with is Harun al-Rashid. Those of you who remember reading the Arabian Nights with me, or didn't ever read the Arabian Nights with me, he is the caliph. He's the head of the Muslim forces in the East. He was, and by all accounts, a really nice guy. You know, I mean, and Harun al-Rashid sent Charlemagne gifts. With Harun al-Rashid, king of the Persians, who held almost the whole of the East in fee, always excepting India, Charlemagne was on such friendly terms that Harun valued his goodwill more than the approval of all the other kings and princes in the entire world, and considered that he alone was worthy of being honored and propitiated with gifts. Rumor has it that not only did he send an elephant, which, you know, we've been to zoos and seen elephants, but just imagine you've never seen an elephant before. I mean, in a battle situation or not, just imagine, probably none of us remember our first sight of an elephant, unfortunately. You know, we were little kids and we got taken to the zoo or whatever, and I don't count pictures and books or, you know, you got to experience it firsthand. It's pretty amazing. It's way weird. The trunk thing and it's a weird creature and it's huge. Also, rumor has it that the Arabs, who were amazing scientists, had invented a chiming clock. They had a chiming and sent Charlemagne. Well, not alarm, but chiming. You know, I have a chiming clock. It chimes. Westminster chimes. It does every 15 minutes. We have to turn it off when people visit to sleep over because they're like, your clock rings every 15 minutes. Like, I know, isn't it wonderful? Like, no, it's not. But this was not. This was an amazing contrivance as far as the West was concerned, and they sent one to Charlemagne. He goes on to say that when Charlemagne's messengers, whom he had sent with offerings to the most holy sepulchre of our Lord and Savior, remember Jerusalem is under Muslim control, and to the place of his resurrection, came to Harun and told him of their master's intention, he not only granted all that was asked, but even went so far as to agree that this sacred scene of our redemption should be placed under Charlemagne's own jurisdiction. Apparently, according to Einhard, this chunk of Muslim-owned land in Jerusalem, Harun al-Rashid gave it to Charlemagne. This is more important to you than it is to me. I will let you take charge of this. I will let your pilgrims from there come and go into these holy sites. I know. And here's the thing, it's not always been like, there's different levels of it. So until the Turks came in and took over the Muslim world, so this is like, I don't know, 1100, something like that. At this time, all these places that the Muslims conquered, they were cool with you not converting, but they taxed you heavily. I mean, you had to pay boatloads of money to the government. Those were choices. You leave, you die, you pay boatloads of money. A lot of people left, but they let you leave. Yeah. They tax you if you were a non-Muslim. And a lot of people honestly converted to Islam because it was just easier in those lands because they couldn't get away and they couldn't afford to pay the taxes and they didn't want to die. But Karsten is absolutely right. When under the Turks, they were singing a different tune. It does say in the Quran, though, you know, that the infidels should be punished with death. Harun, though, is an enlightened sort, I guess. Although I was reading a book about this, a history book about this time period, and they were saying we have lots of letters, like public letters, very sort of distant and formal between Harun al-Rashid and Charlemagne. But you know, the vast majority of people didn't want Charlemagne being buddy-buddy with Harun al-Rashid because he's a Muslim. But behind the scenes, there was all sorts of trade going on, you know, like under the table. People were like, money was headed east and all sorts of good stuff was coming west. And they had just sort of a hidden trade going on. It was good for everybody. But then they didn't really announce it to people that we're in cahoots with the Muslims. You know, we just kind of kept it to ourselves. But they made formal, you know, oh, your friend Charlemagne sends you greetings. And everybody was okay with that. Yeah, Ethan.
This story kind of shows how God works, because like that's Holy Land, that's Jerusalem's Holy Land, and Harun saw that and importance
Mm-hmm,
was,
mm-hmm.
and it's just like, here you go. That's I mean, God can work through anything.
Yes.
Even a Muslim person, like, come on.
Cyrus the Persian let the Jews go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. You know, I mean, God uses whomever he wishes. Yes, Matthew.
It's also kind of interesting that because the Muslims regard like Jerusalem and the surrounding area as Holy Land too.
They do.
So they could have just said, no, you don't get to, it's ours, but they, yeah.
Because remember, the Temple Mount is Mount Moriah. This is where Abraham sacrificed, well, didn't sacrifice Isaac, but you know what I mean. And since the Arab peoples trace their genealogy back to Abraham, he's their father too, through Ishmael. This is sacred to them. Okay, let's move on to his, oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rhett.
Was their goal, like with the taxing, to get them to leave? Or did they want them to stay?
I think it was more to get them to convert. Honestly, I think they wanted them to convert. And I think they thought if they put the pressure on them hard enough, they'd get more converts. I'm speculating, Rhett. I don't, but it sounds, from what I've read, it sounds like when people gave up and converted, it was mostly because I don't really have the means to leave or anywhere to go, and I can't pay anymore. So I guess I'm just a Muslim now. Sometimes they secretly, you know, like it was one of those deals where they were on the outside, they were doing all the Muslim stuff, but in the inside, they were not. And God can deal with that however he wishes. I don't care to judge people's hearts. I'm glad that's not my job. Okay, so I want to read something. This is about his private life. We already read about his daughters, but about his wives. And so I want to read this, and then I'm going to read what Notker tells you about the same, okay? All right. So at the bidding of his mother, he married the daughter of Desiderius, king of the Longobards. This was actually the guy whose wife was stirring him up because she had an axe to grind and they caused a war. Okay, married his daughter. Nobody knows why, but he dismissed this wife after 1 year. Next, he married Hildegard, and then by her, he had 3 sons and 3 daughters. And we don't know. I mean, I assume this is that he lost them by death. I mean, childbearing was difficult often throughout history. It is not uncommon for women to die, especially if they've had a good number of children and their health has taken a hit. It doesn't say he divorced. It just says the one. Then a 3rd wife, Fastrada, and last, by a concubine whose name I cannot remember. And in the notes it says, oh, Einhard totally remembers. He just chooses not to, I don't remember. Okay, so he turned this wife out after 1 year, the wife that his mom said marry her. Okay, now Notker. Okay, here comes Notker. For security's sake and to stop them ever again seceding from Frankish rule or doing harm to the territories of St. Peter, Charlemagne married the daughter of Desiderius, king of the Longobards. Some short time afterwards, since she was bedridden and unable to bear a child, she was, by the advice of his devout clergy, put on one side as if already dead. Her father was furious. He bound his neighbors to him by oath, shut himself up within the walls of Pavia, and prepared to do battle with the invincible Charlemagne. Okay, and then it goes on to tell the story of this battle. Einhard's like, yeah, and I don't know why he sent her away. Notker dishes the dirt. Apparently she was never going to produce an heir. Maybe there's more that Notker doesn't know, because he's writing, you know, a good 80 years maybe after the fact. Yeah. So sometimes Einhard and Notker help us to understand each other. We're told he brought up his daughters just like his sons. Like every school subject that the sons learned, the daughters learned. That's awesome. I have nothing bad to say about that at all. I asked you what seemed to, well, let's do his favorite book. What's his favorite book? Who does he like to hear read?
The City of God by St. Augustine.
St. Augustine. He took great pleasure in the books of Augustine, and especially in those which are called the City of God. If you do much reading in medieval literature, Augustine will pop up over and over and over and over and over again because he was revered, including by Charlemagne. What else is he mentioned doing? What seems to be important? What does he spend his time doing?
Conquers, and then he gives some gold and a bunch of different stuff to the Church of St. Peter.
Okay. And in his downtime?
Is this the fourth question?
This is the fourth question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, that was the favorite author. This, oh yeah, fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't count.
He likes to bathe with his friends.
Apparently. I put horseback riding and hunting and swimming, bathing with his friends. Any big, like there was a bigger section spent on one pursuit, one area of which he was never able to accomplish.
Liberal arts.
Oh yeah.
I believe, like,
Read it, Ethan.
I'm talking.
Sorry, I was talking all day. Sorry.
He's guided the question. So liberal arts.
Because I remember.
Wow.
Okay, but still, liberal arts. He wanted to learn everything. He was actually really good with Latin and like a couple other languages.
He said he could understand Greek better than he could speak it, but at least he could understand it.
And he prayed in Latin as well as he could in Frankish. I don't know what that was called. It's not French.
We'll go with Frankish. I like Frankish.
And,
Okay.
He also tried to universalize justice and the laws.
Okay.
Take all of these laws, a bit like Justinian.
Yes.
And yeah.
Okay, Ethan, before you explode.
Write in his own language.
He wanted to learn to write, and he never could. It says, he tried to learn to write. With this object in view, he used to keep writing tablets and notebooks under the pillows on his bed so that he could try his hand at forming letters during his leisure moments. But although he tried very hard, he had begun too late in life, and he made little progress. But it says he paid greatest attention to the liberal arts. He was taught by Alcuin, another deacon, a man of the Saxon race who came from Britain and was the most learned man anywhere to be found. Remember I told you once upon a time, the British Isles were the repository of knowledge, culture, literature. This was where it was happening. The monasteries of Ireland and England and what we call Scotland today were surpassed everyone else in learning, as we read with Bede. And Alcuin, actually somewhere I think it's Notker says that Alcuin was a student of Bede. That's not exactly true. Egbert, do you remember Egbert's death of, there was a letter to Egbert at the back of Bede that I didn't read. Egbert was taught by Bede. Egbert was Alcuin's teacher. They're just, one remove. There's one step in between. So yes, he started schools. Okay, I have a note to look at page 102. In this way, this is Notker, the most glorious Charlemagne saw that the study of letters was flourishing throughout the length and breadth of his kingdom. He set up schools to learn church music, And music, for most of us, music is just sort of an add-on maybe, or we sing a couple of hymns or a few choruses. But in older church traditions, the whole thing is musical. Like the whole thing is chanted back and forth. There's lots of responses from the congregation all the way through. And it was done in a certain way. And then composers rose up who made it even more beautiful. And Charlemagne wanted people trained in the best, the latest methods, in Rome. And actually, Knocker tells us that the Pope sent him some people to train the Franks in church music, but the guys from Rome thought the Franks were kind of losers and didn't want to teach them. So they all agreed to teach people in different places different things. They all agreed to teach them wrong. But Charlemagne wasn't stupid, and he would visit different churches and he'd say, they're not doing it the same way. So he sent a message to the Pope, and the Pope, got the guys in trouble that weren't teaching correctly. But he said, okay, secretly, Charlemagne, send a guy to Rome. We'll pretend he's from somewhere else. We'll dress him up like a Roman, and he can get in on the school, and he'll learn everything here. Then we'll send him back to you. So these were the things important to Charlemagne. He gets to be called the Great. Remember, Charlemagne means Charles the Great. Why? Is it because he fights and wins wars? Is it because he loves learning? Is it because he's devoted to the church? Even if he seems sometimes his virtue seems suspect, we'll say, but he seemed to be devoted. Perhaps for all of those reasons together. But the biggest is what happened in the year 800. The inhabitants of Rome had violently attacked Pope Leo, putting out his eyes and cutting off his tongue. Now, Einhard wasn't quite correct. They tried to put out his eyes and cut out his tongue. They didn't succeed. Einhard didn't know this. It is. And forced him to flee to the king for help. Charlemagne really came to Rome to restore the church, which was in a very bad state indeed. But in the end, he spent the whole winter there. It was on this occasion that he received the title of Emperor and Augustus. At first, he was far from wanting this. He made it clear that he would not have entered the cathedral that day at all, although it was the greatest of the festivals of the church. He was there on Christmas. If he had known in advance what the Pope was planning to do. Once he had accepted the title, he endured with great patience the jealousy of the so-called Roman emperors, he means Constantinople, who were most indignant at what had happened. Charlemagne, let me see what Notker says about this. Charlemagne came to restore the Pope. The Pope had been accused of doing something bad. We don't know what it was. He swore he didn't do it. And Charlemagne reinstated him. And on Christmas Mass, the Pope came out and crowned him Holy Roman Emperor. Okay, here's what Notker says. It happened as a result that certain Romans who were blind with envy accused the above-mentioned Pope Leo of blessed memory of a mortal crime and then tried to put his eyes out. By God's will, they lost heart and drew back at the last moment. They were unsuccessful in their attempt to gouge out the Pope's eyes, but they slashed him across the face with knives. So Charlemagne comes, he puts things in order. There, Leo swore an oath that I'm guiltless of any crime. Charlemagne stayed a few more days in Rome. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm skipping down to the bishop of the Apostolic See called together such people as he could from the neighboring districts, and then in their presence and that of all the unconquered comrades in arms of the glorious Charlemagne, who himself, of course, expected nothing of the kind, Leo pronounced him emperor and defender of the Church of Rome. All authors say Charlemagne didn't know, but now people are very cynical and like, there's no way he didn't know. He went to Rome just so the Pope could crown him emperor. But Notker and Einhard said he didn't know. He always said he didn't know. He didn't ask for it and he didn't know. But there'd never been a guy even worthy close to be called emperor in the West for almost 400 years. And maybe this is why he gets to be the great. His great empire fell apart after he died, as I think I told you last week. He shared it out among his sons, who then proceeded to fight with each other and snatch pieces away from each other, and wasn't good. All right. There is one more thing that I really want to talk about. I want to end our class with this. But I got to read you a couple stories from Notker. Okay, obviously, not gonna have time. Not gonna have time. And let me read a couple of my favorite ones, and then if we have time, I'll read a couple more. But okay. Oh, okay. So he set up a school. This one isn't so funny. He set up a school, and there he was welcoming anybody. You know, you didn't have to be a noble from a noble family to come. You just send your kids to the school. Great. So he set up a school, and they were letting all the students in. And then after a long absence, it says he returned, and he ordered the boys who had been entrusted to Clement's care to visit him and present him their prose writings and their poems. Those of middle class parentage and from very poor homes brought excellent compositions, adorned more than he could even have hoped with all the subtle refinements of knowledge. But the children of noble parents presented work which was poor and full of stupidity. Then Charlemagne, imitating in his great wisdom the justice of the eternal judge, placed those who had worked well on his right hand and said to them, "My children, I am grateful to you, for you have tried your very hardest to carry out my commands and to learn everything which will be of use to you. Continue to study hard and strive for perfection, and I will give you bishoprics and fine monasteries, and you will always be honored in my sight." Then he turned with great severity to those on his left, with a frown and a fiery glance which seemed to pierce their consciences, and scornfully thundered out these frightening words. "But you, young nobles, you, the pleasure-loving and dandified sons of my leaders, who trust in your high birth and your wealth, and care not a straw for my command or for your own advancement, you have neglected the pursuit of learning, and have indulged yourselves in time-wasting follies and in childish sport of fine living and idleness." When he had said this, he turned his august head and raised his unconquered right hand to the heavens and thundered forth an oath against them. "By the King of Heaven, I think nothing of your nobility and your fine looks. Others can admire you for these things if they wish. Know this for certain, unless you immediately make up for your previous idleness by diligent study, you will never receive anything worth having from Charlemagne." I'm not going to do that to any of you, by the way. Okay, this is my favorite Notker story. We'll see if I can have room for more, but I need to talk about your paper, and I also want to introduce next week's reading. Okay. We have shown how in his wisdom, it's kind of long, it's a couple pages, so stay with me. We have shown how in his wisdom Charlemagne exalted the humble. Let us now tell how he humbled the proud. There was a certain bishop who was vainglorious and greatly preoccupied with all manner of stupid things. Charlemagne was highly observant, and he came to hear of this. He gave instructions to a Jewish merchant who often visited the Holy Land and was in the habit of bringing home across the sea many rare and wonderful objects, that he was to cheat and deceive this bishop in any way he cared. The Jew caught an ordinary house mouse. He stuffed it with various spices and offered it for sale to the bishop, pretending that he had brought home from Judea a most costly creature never before seen by man. The bishop was overjoyed at such an opportunity and offered the Jew 3 pounds of silver in exchange for so remarkable a piece of merchandise. "A fine price for such an unusual object," exclaimed the Jew. "I would rather throw it into the sea than let anyone acquire it so cheap and shameful a price." The bishop was rich, for he never gave anything to the poor and needy. He promised the Jew 10 pounds if he could have this incomparable oddity. The clever merchant pretended to lose his temper and replied, "May the God of Abraham forbid that I should lose my labor in this way, and the cost of the transport too." The greedy bishop, his mouth agape with desire for the costly rarity, offered him 20 pounds. The Jew became angrier still. He wrapped the mouse in precious silk and prepared to leave. Then the bishop, deceived and indeed thoroughly open to deception, called him back and offered him a full measure of silver, if only he could have the priceless object. At long last, the merchant yielded to his entreaties and gave in, although with much show of reluctance. He took the money which he had received to the emperor and told him of all that had happened. A few days later, the king called all the bishops and chief men of that province to a council. Inevitably, there was much preliminary discussion, after which he ordered all the silver to be produced and placed in the middle of his palace. He then spoke himself. Elders, stewards, bishops of our church, said he, it is your duty to minister to the poor, or rather to Jesus Christ in the persons of the poor, and not to waste your substance on stupid objects. Nowadays, you act completely to the contrary, and even more than other mortals, you are guilty of luxury and covetousness. Then he added, one of your number has given all this silver to a Jew in exchange for a painted mouse. The bishop, who had been so cruelly deceived, ran forward and threw himself at the emperor's feet, begging forgiveness for his sin. Charlemagne upbraided him as he deserved and let him take himself off in confusion. I love that this is the story of the stuffed mouse. Love this one. Okay, just a second. I got to see if I. Oh, okay. All right. This one's just funny. It's much shorter. And then I promise I will say something else. Okay. One day when Charlemagne was on a journey, he came to a great cathedral. A certain wandering monk, who was unaware of the emperor's attention to small detail, came into the choir, and since he had never learned to do anything of the sort himself, he stood silent and confused in the middle of those who were chanting. Thereupon the choir master raised his baton and threatened to hit him if he did not sing. The monk, not knowing what to do or where to turn, and not daring to go out, twisted and contorted his throat, opened his mouth wide, moved his jaw up and down, and did all that he could to imitate the appearance of someone singing. The others present had not the self-control to stop laughing. Our valiant emperor, who was not to be moved from his serenity even by the greatest events, sat solemnly waiting until the end of the mass, just as if he had not noticed this pretense in singing. When it was all over, he called the poor wretch to him, and taking pity on his struggles and the strain he had gone through, consoled him with these words, "My good monk, thank you very much for your singing and your efforts." Then he ordered him to be given a pound of silver to relieve his poverty. See, aren't you sad we didn't read Notker? Okay, now I lied because I said one more, but you know, I'm in charge here. I can lie if I want to.
Whoa. I'm in charge.
Okay, I can change my plans. That was an unadvised thing to say. Okay, all right. This is well, it's nice to leave on a funny note, isn't it? This one's not funny. Okay, you know what? We'll see. We'll see. Let me talk about other things, and then we'll see if I can do some more of those. I asked you to make an outline for one of the two potential Beowulf topics last week. How are we doing on that? Does everyone think you have? Has everyone chosen one of the two? Was Beowulf a hero, or should he have fought the dragon? Has everyone chosen one of those? And has everyone kind of thought of plenty of backup for how you feel about that and put together some ideas so that you have three main ideas and then each of those have three smaller ideas? Are we okay? If you don't, and okay, so I'm just going to say it. Like, if you're not okay, but you don't want to say in the middle of everyone, I'm not okay, just come up to me after class and we'll go over it, okay? I don't have anywhere I have to be right away. I know it's your lunchtime, but sometimes we just don't want to say it in front of everybody and you don't have to. But here's what I'm telling you all. Don't leave here today without feeling like you have an outline and you've chosen support for your side, okay? Don't leave so that you feel stressed or you're not sure what to do about it, okay? Come see me if it's the case that you don't know. I want you to you're going to write that paper this week. I would like you to put antithesis in it. And I would also like you to use another figure. Many of you have done this with me before. Where is my marker? How does it, like it crawls under. I know it moves by itself. I know it. So we're putting antithesis. Remember, antithesis was the figure of speech where we are putting two contrasting ideas together. So when my long speech last week about the wide world of sports, where the guy said, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Okay, that's antithesis. You know, the postman delivers mail in the burning sun of summer and in the frigid winter wind. Okay, that's an antithesis, putting opposing ideas together. Are we all okay on that? All right. The other one, the next is parallelism. Some of you may have done this in, I mean, maybe we've done this in the high school class. Parallelism is three words. Are we doing both kinds of parallelism? Hang on, I gotta look at my little notes for the next few weeks. No, okay. Three words, phrases, or clauses in the same sentence. I'm not going to write that. In of the same sort. All right, I don't know how else to say that. So in other words, three words of the same sort would be three adjectives, adverbs, verbs. Charlemagne was brave, loyal, and tenacious. That's three adjectives, right? Charlemagne attacked, fought, and conquered the enemy. And now I've done three verbs. Does that make sense? I mean, that's pretty rudimentary. So I don't mean any three words. Obviously, you write three words in a row a lot, but three words of the same part of speech. Another is phrases. Charlemagne fought on the mountains, in the valleys, and across the rivers. And I've used three prepositional phrases. And it has this nice effect. Three is a very nice effect. I can go all out and I can use whole clauses. Clauses have a verb in them. You know, phrases don't have a verb. Clauses have a verb. Charlemagne saw the enemy, marched his troops forward, and attacked without mercy. You know, and now I've got three longer clauses. But do you see how in each case I've used the same sort of construction three times? Does anybody want me to give you more examples, or is that it? Am I being, I don't want to keep saying it if you get it, but I want to give more examples if somebody doesn't get it. Does that make sense? So if you want to put very rudimentary, it can just be three adjectives or three adverbs or three verbs. It's fine. Three prepositional phrases, always pretty easy to crank out. Three clauses can be a little longer because it's not just any three clauses. Like after I checked the weather, I went and got an umbrella so I could walk outside and not get wet. That's three clauses, but they're not parallel. There's three different sorts of clauses. Do you hear the difference between I got dressed after I checked the weather, looked out the window, and ate breakfast. Thank you. I was trying to think of something else related to weather or brain, but I couldn't think of it. I would like you to mark it P. So you should have an A for antithesis and a P somewhere in your paper, in the margin. Are there any questions about that whatsoever? If you sit down to write it and you forget what it is, call me or email me, all right? And I will put you on the right track, okay? I will email you examples. We will walk through it together. You can even email me a sentence. I want to put one in this sentence. How do I do it? And I will help you, okay? All right. The last thing I wanted to go over, actually, I need to reread. Oh, shoot. I brought this. I found this on a bookshelf in my house. This was actually, there's a document in here that's like the treaty laid down by Charlemagne with the Saxons. His rules, like what he was imposing on the Saxons. I was going to read a couple of them because they're kind of. If anyone out of contempt for Christianity shall have despised the holy Lenten fast and have eaten flesh, let him be punished by death. Oh. If anyone in accordance with pagan rites shall have caused the body of a dead man to be burned and shall have reduced his bones to ashes, let him be punished capitally. Cremation, because it was very pagan. The church has always sort of frowned on cremation. I'm not saying it's a sin. They just always thought it was kind of disrespectful to the body that's destined for resurrection. I mean, they know God can put it back together, but it just seems disrespectful. But punished with death? If anyone shall have shown himself unfaithful to the Lord King, let him be punished with a capital sentence.
No wonder the sack.
Yeah, I kind of this sheds light on it, doesn't it? If any one of the race of Saxons, hereafter concealed among them, shall have wished to hide himself unbaptized, and shall have scorned to come to baptism, and shall have wished to remain a pagan, let him be punished by death. I noticed that was on my shelf. I thought, oh, that kind of, like I said, no wonder the Saxons kept rebelling over and over. However, despite the fact that we have this information, that is not the most famous of the battles of Charlemagne. The most famous is this one. I thought that was a cat for a minute. I thought, that's the loudest cat I have ever. We have some loud cats, and sometimes they make some weird noise. Like, why is there a cat outside the window screaming? It's not a cat. Okay, here we go. After this time, I'm sorry, let me just start over. At a time when this war against the Saxons was being waged constantly and hardly without intermission, Charlemagne left garrisons at strategic points and went off with the largest force he could muster to invade Spain. He marched over a pass across the Pyrenees. These are the mountains that divide France from Spain. Received the surrender of every single town and castle which he attacked, and then came back with his army safe and sound, except for the fact that for a brief moment on the return journey, while he was in the Pyrenean mountains, he was given a taste of Basque treachery. The Basques were the mountain people there. They weren't Muslims. They were just mountain tribes. Dense forests, which stretch in all directions, made this spot most suitable for setting ambushes. At a moment when Charlemagne's army was stretched out in a long column of march, as the nature of the local defiles forced it to be, these Basques, who had set their ambush on the very top of one of the mountains, came rushing down on the last part of the baggage train and the troops who were marching in support of the rear guard, and so protecting the army which had gone on ahead. The Basques forced them down into the valley beneath, joined battle with them, and killed them to the last man. Then they snatched up the baggage and, protected as they were under cover of darkness, which was just beginning to fall, scattered in all directions without losing a moment. In this feat, the Basques were helped by the lightness of their arms and by the nature of the terrain in which the battle was fought. On the other hand, the heavy nature of their own equipment and the unevenness of the ground completely hampered the Franks. That's a bit of an antithesis right there. It's two sentences, but in this battle died Egahard, who was in charge of the king's table, Anselm, the count of the palace, and Roland, lord of the Breton marches, along with a great number of others. What is more, this assault could not be avenged there and then, for once it was over, the enemy dispersed in such a way that no one knew where or among which people they could be found. The end. This is the story of the attack on Charlemagne when he was leaving Spain. That's all we know. Some guys got killed, Egahard, Anselm, and some guy named Roland, lord of the Breton marches. Now, this happened, so Charlemagne got crowned in 800. So everything we can always say it happened around the year 800, okay? And so it's just a minor blip in the story of Charlemagne's adventures and his wars. But apparently not for somebody, because a few hundred years pass, and this story has taken hold. It's caught fire. It's embellished with all sorts of details. Now it's a drama about Roland and his stepfather Ganelon, and how his stepfather was a dirty, rotten traitor, and they were going there to treat, for a peace treaty with Muslims in Spain, but Ganelon hated Roland and he wanted to bump him off, and he made a deal behind the scenes. And then they left Roland in charge of the rear guard while they were going through the mountains, and it was a setup. And Roland and all of them died. And it's written down in a poem. I'm going to write a word on the board, but go ahead, say it.
It sounds a little bit like how Americans will view John F. Kennedy and his death. Like it was a setup.
Yes, yes. Except that, yeah, yes,
It's embellished.
yes. So like if there, and then somebody wrote a 100-page poem about it, you know. So am I? Oh, yeah, it's our next poem. It's the Song of Roland. So it's I don't speak French. Okay, chanson de geste. Okay, songs of deeds. These are French, and it's becoming French, not Frankish. It's the language is becoming French, and these are songs about heroes. Bards would travel around. Roland became one of those heroes, and we're going to spend the next 2 weeks reading the Song of Roland. I mean, it's got blood, death, excitement, treachery, horrible punishments at the end. I mean, it's awesome. Okay, now, what makes it a poem? Because we always say, well, what do they think makes a poem? So the stanzas are called lazes. I'm not saying this right, I'm sure, okay? Each stanza is called a lace, all right? And they're not all the same length. So your book is 1, 2, and I'm asking you to read lazes 1 through 142. That's about half of it. It's really not, I mean, 142 sounds long, but some of them are really super short, okay? I'm going to read the first one to you, all right? They don't rhyme, and keep in mind this is a translation, obviously. But the woman, it's Dorothy Sayers' translation, a very scholarly translator of Dante and many other works. She did the best she could to make the meter and everything sound like what it does in the Old French. And the words don't rhyme at the end. They have assonance, which is always funny because it starts with ass, you know. Assonance, everybody giggles, but it means the same vowel sound. So kite and find have assonance as I sound. So, and unfortunately, when I start reading the Song of Roland, I just start like chanting. Something comes over me because it's got a little break in the middle. But I'm gonna let myself embellish it for you guys because. But if you do this to yourself, it starts to lull you into a trance, you know, and you forget what's going on. Oh, and I need to tell you something else. You can jot this down if you want to. Some people have more than one name. Carlon is Charlemagne. Marsil is the same guy as Marcilion. You know, sometimes they change it for the meter. Ganelon is also called Guenes, and he has a little thing. And a panem is a pagan. In other words, a Muslim. All right. So these are just keep in mind. Oh, and Mayhound. Mayhound is Mohammed. All right. So it gets confusing. Sometimes they use both words. So you might just want to keep that in mind. Carlon the King, our Emperor Charlemagne, full 7 years long has been abroad in Spain. He's won the highlands as far as to the main. No castle more can stand before his face. City nor wall is left for him to break, save Saragossa in its high mountain place. Marcilion holds it, the king who hates God's name. Mayhound he serves, and to Apollyon prays. He'll not escape the ruin that awaits. All right, so that's how it goes. They pray to Apollyon. We don't know, in Pilgrim's Progress, there's the battle with Apollyon, right? But some people have said, is this sort of a mashup from Apollo, like pagan gods? We're not sure, but you find out that the Muslims have a bit of an unholy trinity, sort of, that they worship. I'm going to read one more, and then we're going to let you go. Marsilion sat in Saragossa town. He sought an orchard where shade was to be found. On a bright dais of marble he lies down. By 20,000 his vassals stand around. He calls before him all his dukes and his counts. Listen, my lords, what affliction is ours? The Emperor Charles, that wears fair France's crown, invades our country, our fortunes to confound. I have no host, but before him gives ground. I find no force, his force is for to flout. Wise men of wit, give counsel to me now. Save me from death and loss of my renown. There's ne'er a Paynim utters a single sound till Bland Candrin, Valfonda's lord, speaks out. Okay, so at the beginning we meet Marsilion, aka Marsil. He's a Muslim in charge of Saragossa and in charge of that region of Spain. And Charlemagne's a big pain in the rear, in his opinion, because Charlemagne just keeps fighting and he wins all the time. What are we going to do? What are we going to do about Charlemagne? I will let you guys find out what they do. One caution. Sometimes the poet of these songs likes to repeat. In other words, there'll be 3 lazes in a row that basically give you the same information, if you know what I mean. Like the same conversation is going on. And sometimes if you expect it to move linearly forward, don't, if it's obvious that they're still talking about the same thing just from another angle, it's just the same conversation, or it's being looked at in a different way. It's like a different camera shot in a movie, you know, there's different angle. But don't be shook if you suddenly seem like you're reading the same thing over again. You know, it'll be different words, but that the same episode is happening again. It doesn't mean they did it 3 times. It means you're just hearing it from different angles. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. I love the Song of Roland, and it's become very famous. I didn't know this before I taught my own kids and we read it, that I would read stuff and it would talk about great villains of history, and Ganelon was one of them. Ganelon. And now, once you know, though, oh, he pops up on all the lists. He's a rotter through and through. So enjoy. I will see you next week.